This is going to be a quick run through of how to use the paper tower cost estimate Excel sheet. I'm just going to be using made up values while I go through this just to show how it's used, but when you're using this, you're going to be using data from your tower, like the size of columns, size of beams, and whatnot. So again, everything I use is made up, but you will use actual data and information from your tower. So the first area in this sheet to put data into is the labor cost area. So I'll just put my name in as Danny. I'll leave the wage per hour alone, which you will too. Under hours worked, I'll just put 2.5 hours, like I said, made up. You'll put in however many hours you actually worked on your tower. And then Excel will automatically calculate the total cost of my labor by multiplying the hours worked by the wage per hour. So you do not need to do anything in the subtotal cell. You just need to change the hours worked and then put your name. So moving on to the material cost, you'll calculate the cost for the columns, the beams, the gussets, and the braces. And all of that comes from these tables down below. It's also worth noting that there's different material types. So there's notebook paper, printer paper, and cardstock. But you need to note that the printer paper and cardstock are considerably more expensive than the notebook paper. And again, this project is graded on cost, so you don't want to necessarily use those unless you really have to, because they will drive your cost up. So moving to the material cost, I'm going to assume that in my example, I just used notebook paper. So everything that I work on here, everything that I put into this table will be notebook paper. So for the columns, all the columns everybody makes will be 9 inches. So I'll just put in 9 inches. I'm going to assume that I used 1/4 inch diameter columns with just 2 layers. So I'm going to go down to the table for beams and columns and look for 1/4 inch 2-layer notebook paper. So again, in the table for beams and columns, I'm looking for 1/4 inch, 0.25 inch with 2 layers of notebook paper, which is the first one in the table. So cost per inch for that is $1.15. So I'll take the $1.15 and type it into the cost per inch. And then the quantity, I have 4 columns, 1 at each corner. So I'll put 4 there. And again, Excel automatically calculates everything in the subtotal, so you don't need to change anything there. So moving to the beams, I'm going to say I made my tower using 4-inch beams with 1/4 inch diameter again and 2-layer, and that is the same cost per inch as my columns, so it'll be $1.15 again. I made my tower using 8 beams, so again I'll type in 8 under the quantity and Excel automatically calculates it. So moving to gussets, I just used 1-inch square gussets with the 1-inch thickness and 1 layer. So I'll move down to not the beams and columns table and not the braces table. I'll move down to the gussets table and I'll look for a 1 height and 1 width, so it's the 1 by 1 with a cost per inch of 30 cents. So I'll take 30 cents and put it in the cost per inch for the gussets. And then I used 12 gussets. And then finally, the braces. I used 6-inch braces with a 1/8 inch diameter, so it's 0.125, with 1 layer. So now I'll go down to the braces table, so not the gussets table, not the beams and columns table, the braces table, and I'll look for a 1/8 inch diameter, 1 layer. So just again the top layer or top row for me. So 1/8 inch, 1 layer. 10 cents per inch. Type in 10 cents. And I used 16 braces. So these are the subtotals for each of your materials, so your columns, beams, gussets, braces. And again, Excel calculates them all automatically. The fines you will put in if you use any of these infractions, as long as you don't do any of these. If you don't use glue that's not Elmer's, and if you see anything that this says, you'll put a value in there, but for the most part you'll ignore that as long as you don't do those infractions. Excel automatically calculates the total cost by summing up the cost for labor and the cost of the materials, puts that there. So my tower, my made-up tower, would cost $153.90. So again, that was just a quick run through of how to use the tower, cost estimate for the tower. And again, just make sure when you're finding your cost per inches for each of your materials, make sure you're looking at the right material used and make sure you're in the right table. So if you're looking for beams, make sure you're in beams and columns. If you're looking for braces, make sure you're in braces. And if you're looking for gussets, make sure you're in gussets.